Hello and good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council's Member Development Group meeting. I would like to remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the local authorities' executive arrangements, meetings and access to information regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch their microphones off when they are not speaking, but also to switch them on when you do want to speak. Okay, thank you. Right, so I would now like to move to the first item on the agenda. First of all, are there any apologies for absence?
Yeah, there aren't any apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go in the order that it's on here. I know they've been mixed up, but we'll just do it in this order. Are there any declarations of interest for the meeting? No? Right, fantastic. Okay, on to number 3 already. So minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of October 2022. Now the minutes were in the information pack and I've read them, but I'm very much aware that I was not in this group back in October, and Councillor Malinder was the chair of that group then. So can I, Councillor Malinder, Councillor Williams and Councillor Phillips, you were all present at that meeting. Can you please comment on whether you think the minutes are accurate and happy with them?
Yeah, I'm happy to confirm the minutes and happy with those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. So we accept those minutes. You need me to sign off. Okay, thank you. We're doing well. We're on to the penultimate item already. Fantastic. Right. When we were all elected in May, a councillor induction programme was set up for us. So this item is to evaluate that councillor induction programme. So I shall hand over.
Thank you very much. Evening, everybody. So our first item of business, real substantial business that is, starts on page 7 of your information pack and is really an evaluation of the induction programme that we ran earlier this year. So those people who were with us last October will remember various conversations about what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and we've made some significant changes this time round. I'm pleased to report that in the general sense, the feedback that we received was very positive, and that is contained in the report on page 9. In essence, for those, just to remind you, the induction programme overall included a handbook that was given to all councillors when their results of winning their particular ward were announced. There were 3 sessions, 2 evening sessions and 1 sort of 3/4 Saturday session, to which everybody was invited, and we had quite good attendance. And that in itself forms the induction programme. So this document highlights all of that. It looks at the feedback that we received through SurveyMonkey afterwards. And in paragraph 5.1, I've posed a number of questions that I think would be interesting to know the answers to. But of course, you are more than welcome to pose your own questions to each other. But also, I'm interested in your feedback. The idea of collecting that now is that we make a record of it. And in 2.5, 3 years' time, when we have a similar discussion, but before the election, about how are we going to do it? What are we going to do this time? What we're going to change? We actually pull that back out and go, okay, so after we did it last time, this is what we said we'd change. Quite happy.
Okay, thank you. So we're discussing the induction programme as Charlotte outlined. Does anyone have any comments that they would like to make? Councillor Malinder.
Thank you, Chair. I may be slightly biased, Firstly, thank you for the report, feedback and everything. There was, for those of us who are new councillors or new to this committee, certainly there was an awful lot of work went into it, as has been already said. Lots and lots of sessions or parts of sessions were devoted to making sure we could get the best information out there in the best possible way to new councillors. We realise it can be quite daunting, quite off-putting if you're not local, if not don't have a background in local government at all, then the terminology alone can really, really be sort of off-putting to people. I think the feedback we've had is, by and large, very, very positive. I'm very, very pleased to see that. Very relieved to see that. I think it says 73% were very satisfied and 27% satisfied. There's always going to be a few things we can pick up on, learn and develop, and online learning is the thing that's available going forward for anybody who's missed anything out and wants to do additional stuff as well. I still think it's a little bit clunky compared to a lot of the training stuff that's out there as well, but that's something perhaps for another time. I'm pleased to see that people were just quite positive about it. I have to say, I thought the booklet that everybody got was very, very good. It laid things out very, very clearly. I've seen some councillors in full council with photocopied sections of it in front of them just for quick reference. So obviously, some parts of it are very, very useful, certainly. There's a note about people having slides in advance so that people can make the notes on them instead of a separate place. I kind of understand that, but at the same time, we're trying to cut down on the actual amount of physical paper being produced anyway. So there's the swings and roundabouts to that. But nonetheless, overall, I thought it was very, very good, and I'm looking forward to hearing other people's feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Malinder. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, thank you. I thought obviously I'm brand new to Borough Council, and I found it very useful. So I do have some sort of feedback in terms of suggestions going forward. But just to be clear, I did think it was very good to begin with, but we can always be better, can't we? So in my particular circumstances, from day one, I had two very contentious planning things in the air. One was an appeal, one was a live planning application. And I would have found it useful to have lots of reference material or links to videos or some sort of way of obtaining information on planning. As it happened, what happened was I sort of sought advice from officers ad hoc, which was fine. But I think it would be useful to have lots of information. I appreciate there's a fine line between bombarding people with too much information that it's overwhelming, but also sort of giving them the tools they need to and the information they need to do the job. But overall, I thought it was good. But as I say, it would have been useful, I think, to have a bit more information out the gates. And something that was people started talking about before the meeting. Actually, it was mentioned about YouTube channel and organising things. There are ways of getting training sessions online that are password protected. So if people are worried about training sessions and so on being out there in the public domain, it would have been useful if there were some previous sessions, for example, online that you could dip into. That were clearly sort of referenced and you could search for and find. And that may be something we want to consider going forward, because of course, once we've done one training session, if it's recorded, it can be useful for subsequent sort of generations of councillors. So overall, I thought it was good, but those are the sort of minor suggestions I would make personally.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Birch. I think under the next item, we're going to discuss in more detail about the e-learning that is available, and maybe having some e-learning around planning might be something we want to come back to and raise then as a positive suggestion. Thank you. Councillor Williams, did you want to say something?
Yeah, remembering from when I came on to council in 2019, I think the 3 sessions that we had were kind of split over quite a few weeks and days, and it kind of was quite intensive because of you're constantly coming back to this building for everything that we did on the Saturday. It was over, and that was kind of one of the suggestions and way that member development went about having it on the one day that everybody could come, and I felt that it really worked. I know it was probably is very daunting for new councillors, but to kind of cram it into one day, I think it kind of gives a good stead for people because it lets them hit the ground running, and gives them that kind of big overview of how council works, and in each session kind of fed into how scrutiny works, and then and then the actual mock-up of the council chamber as well. So I think it gave them that information from the outset rather than 2 weeks later. So I think from that point of view, for me, I felt it was better. But going on that with the Saturday, one of the things that we kind of were speaking about, I think, from back in October, was about kind of for new councillors, essentially was to make sure that they came to that because of it being only the one day. Do we know what the breakdown was for those 3 sessions of who were new councillors that attended to opposed to like re-elected councillors? Because it would have been nice to know kind of the percentage of new councillors that did manage to attend, because of course then it was like the difficulty of trying to re-deliver that session on an alternative day for any new councillor that didn't attend, but it was kind of sold to re-elected councillors as a refresh and a just to come and kind of refresh the memory and understanding, and if anything's changed in the 4 years and operational. So
okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Can I hand that back to you, Charlotte? You would know the breakdown of how many newbies attended, and if there were newbies who didn't, how have they caught up?
Absolutely. So off the top of my head, yes, we have the figures because of course we take attendance for each one. Off the top of my head, there were 3 or 4 new councillors that didn't come to the final session, which was the Wednesday evening where we talked about town and parish councils, and we had the big projects, and each of our internal departments gave their presentations. But I think there was only 1 new councillor who didn't come to the Saturday, which is where the majority of information went on. So they were offered a personal rundown of the entire day, which is what we do for councillors like Councillor Barney who come in on a by-election. So that we kind of pick people up that way. But they didn't want that. What they wanted was a copy of the slides, and they were more than happy that they had enough information from that to pass them through. So we do make sure that we pick up people who aren't able to attend, but actually the attendance was very good.
Thank you. It was very good, and I was a new councillor as well, and I think I found each of the sessions very useful, and the fact that they were very close together. But I'd really also like to hear from Councillor Polenta, because you are a new councillor also.
I don't have much to add in terms of criticism, because I think an induction day, it's a very nuanced, a very complex entity. It tries to reconcile people with heterogeneous dispositions, with different perspectives. They come from different backgrounds. We represent areas with probably conflicting as well perspective, desires, disposition, social geographies. We bring on board different histories and connection to politics. Some of us are more conversant to local government, nomenclature, procedures, institutions. Some of us are more connected to rank and file type of politics. So it's a very difficult, I suppose, an induction to capture it all. Some of us comes from areas that they have burning, urgent planning application to respond with a lot of loaded history. And being part of Rushcliffe as well, I was part of that. But it's a very difficult, I think, induction to capture it all, because it's how you move from the generic to particular. And it's very difficult, I suppose, to speak a language without learning the alphabet. It is a very difficult thing. You have to start from the alphabet, no matter how pedantic and boring may seem. So starting from that understanding and expectation of the induction, I would say the induction met my expectation, because from a person that wasn't familiar at all to the nomenclature and the structure and the governance of local government, I got a basic understanding and the basic framework, and I got the feeling as well, the feeling of the people, the dynamics of different relationships, and that's, I think, is a good starting point. Of course, induction is never enough, and that's why we need ongoing training as opposed to particularize and contextualize what we are doing. So I don't have the criticism of the way the induction, my only, it's not a criticism, it's probably that my attraction to local government is that it has a potentiality to feminize the debate and to be less masculine than the national government, to be more tentative, more putative, more relational. And I would have liked to see a female type of workshop as well, or a discussion on the feminist side of municipal politics on the first day, as a small workshop, as a break-off group. To
Okay.
emphasize, I don't know.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's probably going into the realm of a bit more abstract, and but thank you for that suggestion. What I'd like to raise is a specific comment that was mentioned in that report on the induction day, and that was the IT available. And I know there was a comment that a lot of people couldn't get their IT set up. And whatever stage we're all at with our knowledge of how the council works, getting set up on IT is absolutely essential to being able to do that job and move it forward. So the question was, the suggestion in the report is that just more people should be available from IT to get things online. Did everyone find that if they had any issues that those were followed up and resolved to get you set up properly? Is everyone okay? Councillor Cumberland. Yeah, Councillor Cumberland. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realise that you... Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I wasn't aware anywhere within the induction programme of existing councillors being involved in putting across what it's like to be a ward member and what circumstances, issues you might come across. For example, Councillor Birch had in fact got an appeal that he'd got to deal with. In fact, we sat on a Teams meeting together.
That was another one on top of the existing one.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. But yes, I think experienced councillor involvement could actually add something to it. We could be telling new councillors what it's like and dealing with the public and parish council meetings and what to expect and how to deal with it. So I don't think that happened. I didn't see it. So I'm just suggesting it as a possibility.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cumberland. Councillor Barney.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Yeah, just first of all to pick up on your initial comments and the work that you've done previously on this committee, and I think that resonates, and you could absolutely see the quality of the work that you've put in here and what we've got out at the other end. It's phenomenal. And just to relate that to my working life, well, as always, and for those of us that are in business, I think the quality of training that we have here at Rushcliffe is on a par, and it actually far exceeds, I think, that I've had in any business environment I've ever had in my working life. I was a particularly inept and incompetent councillor, you'll recall, Charlotte, and those of you that were in my first meeting here at this, when I managed to vote for the wrong group. So you don't get much worse than that. And I just say that to reassure everybody that is a new councillor that you're never going to know it all. You could be a councillor. Well, with Christine Jeffries, how many years? She was still learning. It's a process. And so you don't need to, and I think being honest about that and not even worrying about the political consequences of that is a very healthy thing. And I would say on that as well, that I felt hugely supported by my fellow councillors and across the chamber as well, and particularly my independent friends in East League, who kind of all wanted to, we were rooting for one another. There was that sense of, there's the bigger picture here. It's not just about the punch and duty, it's about doing the best by our residents and for our community. So that was great. In terms of getting help and support from you guys, when, as you rightly said, I had a one-on-one session as a by-election, and that was amazing to have that. And I felt completely sport rotten to have all the executives spend that personal time with me. But then every time there have been issues and I've reached out, you've been there. The only other point I wanted to make is to contrast it to the training that we've had at the county council, because I was elected to the county council at the same time. So never been a councillor previously. And I think the quality of training we've had there is great.
But here, my goodness, there's far more resource poured into training, and there's far more support given than there even is at the county council. So I just make that comment as well.
Thank you,
And I
Councillor.
had T-shirt envy from you looking across at you earlier. So if that's you wondered why I was staring at your chest, that was why. Shipping forecast.
It became a full topic of conversation in business meeting.
Thank you, Matt. And actually, it does speak to the quality of the training that we've received. If you were so incompetent at the beginning, you certainly aren't now. Certainly aren't now. Okay, thank you. With the set of questions that we've been asked to consider, I think we've gone through them all, and there is one just at the very end that I think it's just worth opening up again, which is, what does the group wish to record now that would assist in the development of the 2026 councillors induction programme? So positive suggestions about additional things to add on. We've had a few ideas already. Anyone got anything else to say? I would just flag up the IT, more people, and actually linking into what Councillor Birch said about you had some very live and complex issues coming in that you had to deal with, and Councillor Cumberlack obviously gave you some support with that, which is fantastic. I thought about setting up a clinic, so if any other councillor coming in new had anything live and they didn't know where to start, whether there was a clinic option formally available for them. That might be something. Oh, I've kicked off something. An idea. Councillor Williams.
I think it might be, particularly like we've highlighted with planning, is just for officers to be mindful for new councillors of existing caseloads that are existing on wards. So a new councillor, because of course you can't wait for them to get training in the planning and to fully understand, because the training for planning wasn't in these 3 sessions, it was a later one. So for getting all of that understand, so I think it's just kind of being aware of a new councillor coming in, and if there is live planning applications for a new councillor, so by the time they've got their feet under the table, so to speak, that maybe it's just to kind of speak to them and how to deal with those.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, planning training. So there are 2 planning training sessions, and we'll come on to them in the next report. One was planning for ward councillors, and one was planning for committee members. We prioritise those. If you go back to the schedule of when they were, certainly the first one was within a week and a half, 2 weeks potentially of you being elected, which was, if you take into account the fact that you've got an awful lot of information, you're absolutely exhausted, you've just been through that process, it's the earliest we feel that we can do it. And both sessions happened before the first planning meeting. Now, I absolutely take on your point, Councillor Birch, about live things going on, and certainly what I've written down is, we need to be better at making sure that you're up to speed. If there is something live going on, it's contentious potentially, and you're already getting grief from your residents wanting to know, then we need to make sure that the case officer is allocated to you much quicker to bring you up to speed, rather than waiting until it's time for the meeting and perhaps that application is going for a decision. That's what I've written down. I don't think it's necessarily about moving the training forward or whatever, because there just isn't enough hours and days in which to do that. It's pretty much as early as we can. It's prioritised before anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I wasn't meaning about the training coming in. It's just because if there is something that's live and a councillor wouldn't have had that, and I know I appreciate it's a week and that, but often planning applications, a week's kind of could be a long time, and depending on where it is in the cycle and the time scale for that planning application, by the time the councillor gets that training, it could be the end of it. I don't say that there might not be many, but it's just to kind of assist the councillor that if there is something like that that's live and there's a planning application and there hasn't been a comment or there's an appeal or something and it's going to committee, it's just kind of a caseload handover on like applications if there is anything like that.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So does that mean that you would support a clinic type approach? Because there may be 1 or 2 or no councillors coming in that have got an issue to deal with.
depending on how that clinic is, if it's for other councillors to come in, I could see that the councillor, because of course not having the training, might not know what or understand the issues on it. But if you had a planning officer who kind of said, I've got this live at the moment, you've just been elected and it's due to expire in 5 days, kind of thing, or it's contentious or what, I'm just thinking of a caseload of the planning applications for them to kind of just get a better understanding of what's going on with what's going on, just to assist a councillor, because like that, people will find out because it gets advertised of who's been elected, and they could instantly go, oh, well, what are you doing about this application? What are you going to be doing about it? And they're just go, I don't know, because I haven't been able to look into it. And it's like that. The Wednesday night they get set up with IT, they get the login for the portal for the planning applications, and it's so from the Friday, it's like the following Wednesday, that's the kind of the first point that they're able to actually look at it, and look at what's on their caseload. So that's what I'm just kind of thinking it might just assist and try and alleviate the situation that Councillor Birch found himself in when he got elected.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. I think, just expanding a little bit on the planning application thing. As in my ward, when Councillor Wheeler stood down and Councillor Alm took over, he didn't actually see those planning applications that Gordon had already commented on. And I think until he'd done the training, he wouldn't be able to comment on those applications. But moving aside from that, the thing I wanted to raise was about the IT. I think a lot of the problems with IT was that some of our software wasn't compatible with iPhone. So if we knew there was an issue getting certain software onto iPhone as opposed to Android, maybe we should have looked at more advanced and found a solution, or at least inform those new councillors who are coming to have software loaded up on an iPhone or an iPad, but it doesn't actually work.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Phillips. I think because I was one of those people who had a problem, and actually it was just bad luck with bad timing. So they were all very organised and prepared, and it just happened that the security certificate ran out that day, which stopped everything. So I would just flag up, check the security certificate renewal date next time. So yeah, there you go. Thank you. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, thank you. So just really to summarise what I was saying, really, just to sort of clarify it all, I think probably my case was an outlier case and isn't going to be very likely to happen to many councillors. My issue was not so much, it was more that the particular cases I was dealing with required lots of background reading and a site visit and everything else, and it was hard to cram all that in. And frankly, one of them in particular took about a week to to get to grips with. So it's just being conscious that it may be the case, that a new councillor is elected, and it so happens to be timed that when they come in, there's an appeal or there's a contentious application. They need to be armed with everything they need. And I agree. I don't think bringing the planning training forward is necessary, but in my case anyway, I can learn quite well from slides and from written documents. It would have been good that if there was a clear sort of almost handbook or instruction manual, something like I could dip into, because of course I had no experience with planning at all. It was literally from the sort of baby steps onwards, and then all of a sudden you got this live application. And it's important, of course, because to the person doing the application, it's a very important thing, and they deserve to have a councillor who knows what they're on about doing it. So that's my only comment. I don't think we should suggest bringing the training forward, anything like that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Mallinger, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just this on the induction programme for next time. Should it be 2027 councillors induction?
Oh, it should.
No, hang fire. When did we start working on the 2023? I did put 2027. It's like, no, we're talking about the preparation and the writing of it. That means we're in the year before.
Okay.
Thank you for that
but
clarification on your organisational skills.
I know, fantastic.
There you go.
But the other point that I was going to suggest was we always talk about mentoring, don't we, and sort of assisting other councillors. So perhaps we make it a bit more front and centre next time round. That when we've got, one of the questions is congratulations. If you're a councillor who is a returning one of the things is, and by the way, would you like to be in a pool of people who are available for new councillors to come and talk to, regardless of party or anything like that, just to ask about planning or licensing or what it's like to be a councillor in casework. I've had outside of this council, I've had 3 or 4 councillors I've been sort of doing informal mentoring for in other authorities, and they're brand new. And it's like, how does it work? How does casework work? What do I do? Do I, all that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Manager. I think clinic/mentoring probably meaning the same thing around that. Councillor Cumberlack.
I just want to say it may be something that should be flagged up with the planning officers to see if there is a consultation date which is closing very soon after an election, can they get that extended? Which would give some time then for new councillors to at least absorb something off the web portal and then be able to make a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Romney.
I just wanted to respond to Councillor Birch, really, just on planning. I'm still learning loads about planning and never going to know all of that. But I will often ring the case officer, particularly if there's something I'm unsure of, chat it through with them. They're always pragmatic, they're always reasonable. You could also reach out to the chairman of the planning committee as well. It's not a political committee, and again, they'd be very willing to talk to you. So just talk to other people and it will help. And I'm still talking all the time.
Brilliant, thank you. So thank you very much for all your feedback. I think in summary, it was a very well received, well thought out and well delivered induction programme that seems to have gone down very positively, and just a couple of suggestions there of how to move forward, which are totally dependent on individual situations elected members find themselves in at the time. Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, and this will probably warrant longer discussion. So it's about ongoing councillor training. So our update from September 23, and there's an information pack with that as well, which I'm presuming everyone's read. But Charlotte, would you like to step in?
Thank you very much. It's nice when we have a meeting when these 2 items come together, because they do follow on one from another. And actually, in the induction this time round, one of the decisions that this group was making sort of 12 months ago was very much what falls into the induction, what do you need to know immediately, and what can we move into a training programme moving forward through this year. So this report, which starts on page 11, looks at all of the training that's been delivered so far. So after the induction and up to the beginning of September. So far there have been 12 separate training events. There's a list of them on page 12 running on to page 13. And each one of those, we've written a little bit about what it was, who it was delivered by, and what the feedback was from people. It's generally quite positive. A few little niggles that we will obviously try and work out in future sessions. So far, all of those sessions were delivered by officers of the council. The only external person that we've had so far was licensing training, which was last week. And it seemed to go down very well. I don't know how many of you were in attendance there, but that's all we've had so far. So paragraph 4.4 looks at the training programme as it stands for the rest of this year, and the events on there. But before we move on to e-learning and attendance and all of those kind of issues, one of the things that's come up in audit before is how many of our councillors have been trained to sit on committees for which training is mandatory. So as far as the constitution goes, training is mandatory before you can have a seat on planning, licensing, standards, and should we ever need it, employment appeals and the appointments committee. Now, we don't very often need those two, they're very small, but what we would do if we did need them was offer training at that point in time. So we only really focus on planning, licensing and standards. Licensing was last week, and I think there are 4 members of the committee that are current members who weren't able to attend that training last week. Everybody on planning committee has been trained, and we have about 28 other people also trained, which means we've got a nice big pool of subs, so that's looking very good. And the standards training is later on in November. I'm not too worried about that one just yet. One of the points that I've raised through this is whether you feel additional sessions on training that has already taken place would be warranted. Certainly one that people have mentioned to me anecdotally was Greg's session on GDPR and cybercrime. I didn't realise such things would be exciting, but apparently more people wanted to go than were able to do it on that date. If we have a look forward, there is paragraph 4.6 suggests training that we've done for councillors in the past that's not currently on the programme that we could put forward into next year's programme. We also have some information about e-learning, which I understand is going to be a topic, so I'm not going to cover that. I'll let you ask the questions on that one. And paragraph 4.9 talks about training attendance. Certainly, I'm not worried at the moment. I get that people are busy, that they have other matters to attend to. There's meetings, there's your ward work and such like. You also have day jobs and families. Training attendance is high at the moment, as I would hope it would be, at just under 60%. It's when it drops down to sort of 30 and 40% that I'm thinking, what is the point in officers turning up to do this if you're not going to be engaged? But we're not there yet, which is good. I've put some information in about the budget. It's looking pretty good at the moment, mainly because most of the training has been offered in-house. So that's fine. If you don't spend it, it goes back into the pot, which is a good thing, but it's also there available as well if you want to undertake training. So for East Midlands councils, for example, offered chairs training earlier in the year. If you want to do that, that's the money that we take that from. Paragraph 4.12 has got some questions in, but I get the impression I probably don't need to have asked them because you're going to raise lots of things anyway.
Well, we'll start with one of these questions. Okay, so I just want to flag up the most pressing point in what you just outlined, Charlotte, was about the need for mandatory training before the licensing and standards, particularly because planning has been successful. That's been achieved. So there is a licensing committee very soon. The licensing training, there was only one session. And as you've pointed out, 4 people who were on that licensing committee were not able to come. I think last minute things cropped up. So what is the situation with that and what's the solution?
Okay, so we do not have the level of expertise within our licensing team at the particular moment in time now to deliver that training internally, which is why we brought in somebody from another council. We could invite them to come back in and do another session. But if you were only looking at 4 people, if you could get their commitment that they were going to turn up at a particular time, it's still not a very cost-effective way of doing it. If you could get more people to come along, that would be great, but it's unlikely given that we've just had a session just last week. But we could do it. If that's the way you wanted to do it, we could offer another session either now in the next couple of months or sometime next year. The alternative is to actually send individuals on training for the Institute of Licensing training, if that's what it's called, isn't it? Institute of Licensing. So they offer training as well, but that would be a per delegate cost. Interestingly, it's more than it would cost for getting somebody in-house, which is why we do it this way. So those are the 2 options.
Is there a time frame issue on this then? Because the licensing committee, is it next week?
There is a licensing committee next week. So what you would need to do is sub on people who have been trained into the positions of those people who haven't yet been able to undertake the training in order for the committee to be its full capacity.
So my question then is to solve that, is the chair of that committee aware of the situation and plans in place to?
The chair of the committee is aware and Democratic Services are aware. So what we would be looking for is people coming forward and saying, I can't attend this training at this meeting because I haven't had the appropriate training, therefore my sub is. that's down to individuals to sort out.
Okay, super. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. Is there not a third option where the 4 people who didn't attend the training, we take them off licensing and put 4 new people in who have done the training?
You probably wouldn't want to do that as a switch out, because that would actually trigger a report to council, because that's where your nominations of committees are made. Because licensing committee doesn't sit very often, I would say actually the pragmatic way of doing it is what I've suggested, which is subbing people through and then trying to put alternative training in place so that you don't have to continue to do that through the year.
So it needs to be subs in the first instance. Is that something to look at going forwards then, you think, with the ongoing training programme, that there needs to be a bigger time frame if you're in this situation again where you've got time to fill in? Because those 4 people need to be trained.
They need to be trained if they want to actually attend the meetings, yes.
Otherwise you're on a
Otherwise,
permanent substitution.
You're on permanent subs, and presumably you've nominated yourself for that because you want to be on that committee. That means that the training needs to go in place. So either we need the chap to come, I think his name was Dave, we need Dave to come back in and do more training, or we need to send people on the training for the Institute of Licensing, which is about 3 times as long and takes an entire day. Just so you're prepared.
Councillor Williams.
As you pointed out, it comes to full council to make a decision on who's on committees, and we do that every year. So it could all then change again come what, May 24, and we might have those kind of, or other people might want to swap around and change about on it, which then would that trigger another training session for licensing for if there is then people who haven't had it, but of course they might have this year, but with the auditing purposes, is it that it has to be this cycle for the training that they have it? Because I've seen where people have said, well, yeah, I did it last year, or been on that, attended that course last year, even if it's not a mandatory one, but then they kind of go, well, do I need to go again, and that type of thing. But I'll ask that point further.
So the councillor's learning and development policy makes it very, very clear that training is to be sort of bookended by an election. So you have to complete the training. If it's mandatory, it has to be within the 4-year cycle. Now, things like licensing and planning, legislation changes all of the time. So we are continuously trying to keep you up to date with things that have changed, and we'll put on additional training throughout that 4-year period. The idea of putting training on at the beginning of the cycle is to pick up all of those new councillors who have not had any exposure to these things yet, to make sure that people are on those committees that have got the training. And we always try and encourage more than just the committee members to come along. 1, so that you've got subs, but 2, you go, actually, that was really interesting. I'm going to put my name forward for that next year. Now, after annual council each year, we do go down those nominations and go, these people have had the training. Nothing we might talk to Jeff Carpenter, whose licensing falls within his department. Has anything changed? Do we need to put more training on? Or if everybody has been trained, are we okay to roll forward with this committee? If it's just 1 or 2 people, again, we might send them on the Institute of Licensing course. If it's a whole bunch of people or something's changed and we feel that we need to update the training, we'll have people back in again. But it does need to be within that 4 years.
So that leads on to the question of e-learning, and a lot of discussion was had around e-learning in the last meeting that I've read from the minutes and watched the meeting. So there is the single log on to the portal which was introduced, and I've given it a go. You can log in, certainly. Would anyone like to talk about their experience of e-learning? Because having a backup of a particular course available as e-learning would kind of solve a problem. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, so as I said, I have dipped into some of the e-learning. I personally, my personal circumstances mean I can't attend very many evening sessions. I do work Saturdays as well, so Some of the training sessions are a bit of a write-off. The e-learning portal as it stands, I think, is very good. And I did the GDPR interactive module. I don't know if anyone's done that.
I think you were very brave.
Well, I actually quite enjoyed it, I've got to say. It was very good. It was interactive and it was actually quite testing. So there's an assessment at the end. And I thought, oh, I've got this down, I'll get 100%. And I got about 50. So I had to, you can do the test as many times as you need. But the point is, it was very challenging, which is a good thing. And as I say, it wasn't simply a matter of just, rote learning and reading a PowerPoint presentation. It was interactive. And going back to my earlier point as well, I think if there is a vast sort of library of documents you can read, if you need to dip into it to get the information, to my mind, it doesn't matter if you get the information with someone doing a presentation in front of you or reading it. The only advantage I can personally see from being in the room is that you've got the ability to ask questions. But of course, if you can note down the questions if you're reading it online, and you can ask officers later, then it does the same thing. So my personal opinion is it's good what's there, and I would like to personally see more e-learning options for a wider range of subjects, because it's quite narrow at the minute, I think, with what the interactive modules offer. So if that could be sort of broadened, I think that would be beneficial. And as I say, me personally, and I'm sure other people work evenings as well, if they can't attend the training, it is really important.
Thank you. So do you think there is a case for having backups, particularly around licensing and standards, as e-learning modules available to solve this problem? Councillor Cumber.
I think backup would be good, but I don't think we should go down the e-learning route. Having seen what's happened with e-learning to date with existing councillors, I think perhaps you talk as an exception. There aren't many who like it. But I don't think we should be using it as our main way of training. I still think that face-to-face is, particularly if you're on training on something for the first time, I think there's more security. You feel more secure in being in a face-to-face training session.
Thank you. Councillor Mallinder.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as councillors, we've been a bit rubbish with the learning. I include myself in that. The only thing I thought was I changed to a new job earlier this year, and all the e-learning that I'd had here was very, very similar to the previous e-learning that I had when I worked for a local authority. And obviously, it's the same kind of stuff from the same kind of background. But with the new job I've been in, it's sort of opened up a wide range of other types of online learning. A lot more use of video, a lot more use of sort of people talking about what's happening and giving information that way, online presentations, and a kind of interactivity that I how can I put it? It's a lot slicker than some of the stuff that we've had in the past on the e-learning side of it. Some of it is also absolutely appalling and rubbish, and I would never watch it again. One was GDPR. GDPR does not need to be a massively long session with somebody talking to you about it. So I think we just maybe need to be a bit more open to the other types of e-learning that's out there and see what there is. Maybe to look outside the kind of local authority stable a bit more.
Thank you. Can I just flag up then that on a couple of things, because I've tested the e-learning out, and the system's not working the way it needs to. First of all, the courses that I had done on e-learning haven't been registered, and they keep coming up as 0. Can't get a certificate, it's not coming up. And then there is a tab where you're supposed to look at your own training record, which I think is incredibly important to see where you are, whether you've done. So I don't know whether that flags up, what is the mandatory training, what isn't, for you to check. Have I done all the mandatory training, just to know where you are? It didn't work. So there's a problem with the with the actual running of that e-learning. So if you tried to download any stats on how much e-learning any particular person has done, you're not going to get a full record, because I know it isn't recording properly. So that's definitely worth looking at. I would really also like to agree with Councillor Mallinder about e-learning takes many different forms, and it is about variety. And, you know, we all learn in different ways. So there's visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and logical learners, and how information is presented either ticks a box or not with people. And it's that balance of making sure it's done properly. So there's a question there about improvements that could be made to the training that's already taken place. So it links in with that. Councillor Williams.
I just wanted to add on your point, seen on the document where 4.8 about the individual records that are kept for councillors. I remember, I think it was last year, it might have been the first time that it kind of was sent out to individual councillors, and I found that really useful for myself to kind of actually then see what I'd done. And like what Councillor Mallon said, that in kind of your day-to-day job, that like GDPR, you often kind of overlapping, and I found that because I'd done that at work, I was able to send in a certificate from that learning into democratic services, and they logged it that I'd had that kind of training. So I think it's useful for people to kind of see that with what is logged against them, that if it's failed on e-learning and it's and some of the face-to-face ones, and where there's gaps, and it kind of makes people more aware of what they're doing, because I know it's kind of going on request for people, but I think if they actually get it and look at it themselves, I don't know if it's when's best to kind of do that, to send, if it's possible to send it out to councillors as we're approaching the first year, and then to kind of see with some of the courses that were put on, because like what I couldn't attend planning because one of them was in the day, for during the day because of working, and I think then the evening one that I would have attended, I was on holiday, and then I've had anything subsequently since then in order to address that kind of the planning for this year and that. So it's those kind of situations that I think if there's with some of these that might be opened up for the next year, or see where it was low numbers, and if councillors would be willing to have that again, because of course it is just one night of the week, and sometimes there I think there are Tuesdays that there would be personal classes, and as it is just the one day, it would be a shame that if they're able to be on another time or look for next year to redo it, it might be good to get somebody who didn't attend or just refresh as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think your first point was really about assessing where you are, just to knowing what you've done and what you've got left outstanding. And I've flagged up that you can't get that on the e-learning; it just goes to some random other page. Is there a and unless I'd gone into e-learning, I wouldn't have known that was there. So is it a case of sending an email to all councillors with the current record, so they have an update at this point in time? This is what you've achieved, and flag up clearly which are the mandatory ones, and that can't just be a link to the e-learning page because it doesn't work.
Let me just explain what the individual learning records actually show. So it's a Word document. You will have seen a very similar document at the beginning of the year, because we actually sent out a training expectations document that said, these are all the courses that we've got here. These are the e-learning ones. These are mandatory. We expect you to turn up for this. Please make sure you do this. And by the way, you can always send us a certificate or whatever. So we then create one of those documents for every councillor. And when you sign in to say, yes, I've been to a face-to-face training session, we take those away the following day and update all the records. The plan is always, when we have a member development group, to send you that. So that's on my list of things to do next week. The e-learning is slightly different. Yes, there is a page within the e-learning module that looks at, it's supposed to show your progress of where it is. We're aware it doesn't work. We don't know why. There are a number of issues with e-learning, which I'll perhaps come on to in a moment. But internally, one of the things that Helen quite regularly does is look at what has been completed by individual councillors, and then again that gets transferred onto our learning record for you. So it will show wherever you have done training and what you've done. And as Councillor Williams says, if you've done training somewhere else and you've got a certificate to say, I've done GDPR at my place of work or with my volunteer group or whatever, then send it to us and we can make sure that that gets recorded. Now, can I just make a few comments about e-learning, because there's been quite a lot of discussion. So some of the points that you've raised have been really, really interesting. And obviously I will take them away and give them thought. But by way of context, the e-learning package that you have has only been available to councillors since the last election. So we launched it in the February before we had that exciting pandemic in the March, so 2020. So that to me is one of the reasons why it hasn't really ever got off the ground. We had 2 getting to know e-learning sessions that taught people how to use the e-learning system. So only a handful of councillors were able to attend those, and then the world went crazy. And so we've never pushed e-learning as a way to do it because you simply had more important things to be doing at the time. So what we've got now is an opportunity to actually almost relaunch the e-learning, which is what we'll be doing in October. And we can send now, they've kind of moved things on a bit, so that what we can do for you is what we do internally for staff, which is GDPR needs completing. We'll send you an email on the 2nd of October or 1st of October, whatever it happens to be. And you've got 4 weeks to do it in. It gives you a little link directly to the e-learning package. You click it, you go in, you do it, and that's it, it's done. And we'll do that on a regular basis rather than expecting people to go, oh, I have a free evening. What am I going to do? I know what, I'll go and do some e-learning. Now, the e-learning package itself is bought in from a training provider. Whilst we have the opportunity to kind of personalize it to the organisation, to a certain extent, we do not have the resources to create individual packages that are on there. So basically what you're seeing is the standard offering that we've layered on both the look and feel and the words of Rushcliffe on top of. So I'm not going to promise that we're going to go away and do backup modules of stuff that you like and that you might need to do, because we just do not have the resources to do that. But what I will say is I know that there is an exercise taking place at some point this year to evaluate that e-learning module system completely to see whether it is up to date. We've had the same package now, I would have said, for about 12 years. I would agree with Councillor Malandero. It can be so dull. It can be very boring. It's very static. It's the same thing. Imagine internal staff have to do those courses every 2 years and they don't change. But I know that there is a drive to perhaps look at some more up-to-date systems, something that does use mixed media, looks more. They will have different content, and we may be able to, in line with that, also put more stuff online depending on what they offer. So, for example, I know that I have evaluated now about 12 different equality and diversity packages that we could buy into. Essentially, they all say the same thing, just in a different way, but they're all head and shoulders above what we currently have. So it is there, it will come. It's just accepting that what you've got is an addition to the face-to-face learning that we have, not the main way that we train you. The only other point I wanted to make on e-learning is if you don't do it, there isn't really an awful lot of point in us investing a lot of time in it. And that's the situation that we've been in so far, is we've had minimal engagement. So it is just getting off the ground and trying to get people engaged. And it's a chicken and egg thing, because if we made it exciting, maybe you're more likely to do it. If we made it easier, maybe you're more likely to do it. However, we do need to balance things out. So we prioritise the face-to-face stuff because that's what our councillors through Member Development Group and anecdotally have told us they prefer.
Thank you for that update. I think engagement is a key, couple of things. Engagement's a key thing, but I remember there's been only one email saying there's a single log on to e-learning. there hasn't been anything to encourage anyone to do it.
No.
And also, that engagement needs to be powered by smart objectives. You need to do this by this time. It needs to be time bound, so it's then measurable.
The reason that it hasn't been pushed is because we've been focusing not just our resources on the face-to-face, but also being mindful of your time after the election, busy period, people finding their feet. What we find is if we push e-learning or if we put too many face-to-face courses on straight away, people get overwhelmed and they lose interest. And it's really hard to get them back. So it's got to be a managed approach, which is why I'm saying in October, what's a couple of weeks away, that's when we start to move the e-learning forward, because that's when the face-to-face training lessens off a bit.
Okay, thank you. Councillor William.
With kind of saying about the face-to-face courses, do they have to be in person? Because looking down, there was only 2 courses that were done by Teams, and potentially that might help kind of councillors attend because of being able to see, and kind of might be more inclined to attend it, being able to sit at home on the sofa and have a cup of tea rather than having to get in the car, come out on a cold winter's night to hit and that. And the same with officers as well, that they won't necessarily have to come to here and travelling back and that. So it might be that it might just entice people to actually attend some of the training courses, that if they don't have to be physically here, which I would understand if a mandatory one, you'd have to be, so you can physically see that they're receiving it rather than a cardboard cutout on a screen. That is a possibility of some of those courses being done like that of an evening for councillors.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. In my experience, when we've tried to do sort of Teams or in person and on team, it's not worked. You can't hear what people are saying. There's breakdowns in the technology, and I've actually gone from home to actually come here so I can continue as part of that meeting. And also you'll get people who switch off their videos and you don't actually know if they're paying attention or they're making a cup of tea or doing something else. So really I'm keen to make it in person. Thanks.
Conflicting opinions. Gee whiz, so it just shows it's not an easy thing to deliver, is it? Councillor Polenta.
I'd like to ask a question. How do you gauge the engagement of e-learning if the e-learning platform, because I used it as well, and it has this glitch obviously of hardware that although you can perform the course, you can go through all the steps. When you arrive at the final point of record it fails, sends an exception error. So I don't understand how can you gauge how many people have engaged with it, or is it just a word of mouth of which councillors say they have engaged? And okay, yeah.
Thank you. I think that's the point, is that you can't tell.
If you'd like to put your microphone on.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. So what the system shows us behind the scenes is who started it, how far they got, whether they completed it all the way through, and whether the system showed that they completed it. So the reason that it shows you that you haven't completed it is generally that you've not downloaded one of the little drop-down boxes, or you've not moved the bar. So the advice that we give people when they start the course is you have to make that bar at the top move all the way through, and officers fall foul of it all of the time. And you get to the end and you go, oh, it says I've missed something. I've clearly missed one little arrow, one little pin, one little flippy over card. Something hasn't been touched. So my advice is touch everything. The first time you do it, hit them all. And if you have a problem later, go back to the beginning and hit them all again. But it is frustrating. It doesn't work the way that you would. It's not intuitive. It is not a good user experience, but it is what we have. And it is at least an alternative, and it can be used to supplement. Otherwise, we go back to what we had before, which is everything has to be face to face. And it is nice to have a balance because people do learn differently.
Maybe it would be a good idea if we distribute a manual like e-learning for dummies type of thing to have screenshots of the steps and the errors that they make, because I think you spot it is a pattern. We all make the same error, it looks like, which results in this exception error. So that would be, and another idea I would say, I don't want to add anything on e-learning because everybody has different perceptual system and everybody has different functional abilities and different disposition to solitary learning or learning through socialization or a mixture of both. So it's very difficult to, but I would say because people have complex lifestyles and different working patterns and different relationships and obligations, maybe would be an idea, because of course to participate in a committee is not a ritual, it's not formulaic, it's how we feel about our ability to contribute, to digest information, contribute and be part of the group, isn't it? So I think in the same way that we accept, I mean, we can be in a face-to-face meeting and daydream and diverge and just have a physical presence. So my suggestion would be, in order to reconcile, I understand there are as well constraining resources. I appreciate what you have. We cannot have the machine learning, virtual reality type of e-learning, I suppose, because of the budgetary constraint. So my suppose suggestion is, if we have a face-to-face or if we have a Zoom meeting, however you call it, MS Teams meeting, maybe it's a good idea to record it that from our colleagues that they are not able to attend for different reasons, if they can view the course material online or offline, and they can validate that they are happy or that they contact the link, the presenter or the link that is sent at the end of the course, because always some links send some contact details, and they can self-validate that they feel confident to attend the committee, then maybe that's a good enough proof that they can attend the committee, because it would be very difficult, I suppose, to reconcile all these different perspectives and come to an agreement. E-learning, online, offline, MS Teams, on face, on hybrid, it's going to be, and there are so many material constraints as well. Yeah. So that's my
Thank you, and I think that highlights the complexity of it. We all learn very differently, and everyone has a different preferred option, and it's trying to cover as many bases as possible, isn't it? Councillor Birch.
Thanks. So I've got a couple of questions if I may, just because they're pertinent to what we're discussing. The mandatory training, licensing and planning, which I'm not on either of them. What is the sort of requirement? Is it just attendance, or is there an assessment at the end of that to sort of prove that you understand it, or is it just being present in a room at a given time for an amount of time?
It's just a bumpers on seats one, I'm afraid. I don't think we could get anybody to do an assessment, but obviously your participation in both the kind of the commenting on your applications, but also if you came to committee, if there was a feeling from the planning officers, for example, that actually you didn't get it for whatever reason, we would then go, right, okay, let's just sit down and do some more training. So I suppose from that point of view, the assessment is actually your experience of the meeting and how you're engaging with the planning process. But no, there's no test at the end. But I could always put it forward if you wanted me to.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think we'll forego that one. So in terms of moving forward, and perhaps we'll come on to this later on, as Councillor Blenter said, I appreciate people learning different ways. And going back to what I was saying earlier, as I say, it would have been useful if you could dip into recorded sessions, and also cost-wise. And I mean, I don't know if there's any overtime costs for officers staying in the evening and doing all of that. As I say, there's very easy, free ways of recording meetings and then having password access to said meetings. All you need to do is label it in a certain way so it can be searched. And as I say, new councillors and any councillor can just dip in at will, any time of day, 24 hours a day, and see that meeting. And as you said, if there is no assessment at the end and it is just sort of sitting there absorbing the information, to my mind, it doesn't make any difference if you're physically in a room or watching it on a screen. The information is the same that's hitting your eardrum. So I think that would be really useful. And as I say, I think we might come on to that in a bit. So I'll shut up for now on that bit.
Thank you.
So I'm going to be a bit contentious here. So I happen to know all of our councillors reasonably well after such a long period of time, and I know that there are councillors out there who will say, oh, I spent my Friday night watching that GDPR session. I've got absolutely no way of knowing that they were watching that video with their Friday night. But I can't challenge them. And until they make a massive error that causes the council a major problem, we can't do anything about it. So that's why we have strayed away from just putting training videos out there, simply because what we're trying to do is say, yes, you've done it. No, you haven't. The other reason that we've strayed away with it is because it's the officer time to not just create the material and deliver it, but if I need to deliver a training session and I come here this evening and I deliver this training session, but there's 2 of you sat there, sorry, my babysitting fees are not worth me coming in to do that, regardless of the fact that that video may well get watched several times at home. I've got no way of knowing later on. So it has to be made, and this is the other argument for not putting duplicate training sessions on too close together, is it has to be worthwhile for us to deliver it in the first place. And given the option of turning up here in December when it's cold and wet outside and dark, or watching it on telly, nobody's going to turn up here.
Can I just flag up to that anything that is online has to be smart objectives around it. It has to be interactive for engagement, and there has to be some sort of assessment so you get that information. Whereas face-to-face, bums on seats is okay because you pick up that sense whether people are struggling or not. So I think e-learning has its place when it works and it's implemented with those objectives. Yeah. Can I just move on? There's a specific question I want us to consider in more detail, and that is, are there any improvements that could be made to the training that has already taken place? And I really want to focus on the face-to-face training that we've had from staff, officer staff. Councillor Cumberland.
Yes, I'll answer that in just a minute.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say on the last session, Councillor Phillips mentioned that if we have hybrid sessions and if we do improve the IT so that we can have hybrid sessions, can we please make it mandatory that people do not black their screen out? Because you're absolutely losing the object of a screen, you lose the facial expressions, and those are the things that you get when you're here face to face, like me. Yep. So you lose that if you black your screen out. And as you say, you've absolutely no idea whether that person's watching it or whether they've gone down the road to see their friend.
So, I mean, should we pick that up as a recommendation from the group that when there is online training, that having your camera on is mandatory? Is anyone not happy with that? No? Okay, a unanimous consensus going forward.
And you're now asking about previous training sessions. I have to tell you that as an existing councillor, planning was dire.
Any particular planning session? Because there have been 3 separate ones so far.
Anything that was to do with conservation was fine. But everything else, I'm afraid the delivery was dreadful. And those officers who delivered need training.
Would anyone else like to
And
comment?
also, it would help, once again, if there was councillor involvement.
Would anyone else like to comment before I say something? The presentations from those particular courses and some of the others have been death by PowerPoint. They have just been text, and that is not the way to service your visual, your auditory, your kinesthetic, or, well, it does your logical learner, but it doesn't those 3 other types. So training material should never, ever be just slides and text. It has to have that balance, and they have to be prepared properly. Reading text on a slide is not training. It just isn't. So my question then to you is, I appreciate all the officers are trying to do the best they can, but they might not have had the training that's needed to support them to put the course together in the right way it should be done and deliver it in the right way. So what has been done and what can be done to support the officers in that role better?
There are very few officers who have had any formal training experience because ultimately they are planning officers, licensing officers. They are not trainers. We do not train other people. It's very, very unusual to find somebody coming into local government to do, an events officer or whatever it might be. Planning is a really good example. They're there as trained planning officers, they're professionals. Now they can have those conversations, but ultimately what we're asking them to do is very much outside their comfort zone. So whilst it's there and that's what we do it because it's an efficient way of doing it. You get the insider information, but I think I need to manage your expectations and say it's never going to be the same as if you bring in an external trainer who has spent all day, every day of their career training people.
Thanks.
Can I also say, you're saying that they don't have any training in presentation skills, basically. They need them for full planning meetings. They aren't good. We used to have Andrew Pegram. He was, bless him, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and he was brilliant in training. I came on at a by-election like you, and I didn't have any training, and he came down and he said, "What do you want to know about?" I said, "Everything, because I know nothing." And he was brilliant. And he was always good, and he was good on planning committees. He answered every councillor who presented. He answered everything they said. Now, you might still not have been there. I'm afraid to say that was how the training was as well.
Thank you. So I think your point is that the training needs to be effective. So we do need to address this. So either the officers need to have some training or some external person is brought in.
And presentation skills are another skill that they may not have. So maybe it does need to be somebody presenting a planning application who has that skill, and that would be the person who'd then do training sessions.
Thank you. Councillor Barney.
Gareth was next.
Oh,
sorry, not to just.
All mine was just following on from that is just for officers to be mindful is that they are experts in their fields and delivering it, and they do have excellent knowledge on these subjects when they are training councillors on it. But just to be mindful that councillors might not know what they mean by the terminology that they're using, the language that they're using, and they might have to dumb it down for councillors to understand it and kind of have a different example rather than necessarily just repeating a case or an example or something like that, just so it gives a different take on it, so then councillors can then understand what they're meaning, what they're trying to explain. Because like we say, everybody's understanding and trying to, with some of these complex subjects that we're looking at and getting asked to look at and getting trained on, for councillors who kind of approach it and it's the first time of getting involved, it can be quite daunting of what's being explained to them, and you kind of then do need like a dummy's guide too in order to understand it. And sometimes when I've been on it on some of the training, it's just that having that little extra where officers have got frustrated because councillors aren't necessarily understanding what they're trying to do, and then it's kind of gone back and forth between the two sides. And but it's not kind of going on anything of their knowledge. It's just how they've had years of having this and dealing with these subjects. The councillors probably just had that first 10 minutes to try and understand it and get a grasp of it for how to move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Varney.
Thank Councillor Cumbleback for reminding us about Andrew Pegman and the brilliant role he played in this council, which will echo down for generations, I have no doubt. I referenced earlier the gold-plated treatment I had at my by-election, and I had 2 hours 2 hours with anger pressure. It was an hour session. He made it 2 because I was asking so many questions. And I got a bit of a planning background, so quite an affinity with planning. But boys, let's make the point again. Keep making there's so much to learn. We're never going to get all this right. But I was disappointed to hear the comments you're making, Tina, and sorry to hear that I've not attended these planning training. But I wanted to bring some positivity into it. And that last year, I don't know if you called on other members for who've been here around the block a bit. We had some really good training sessions from the planning team. There was one that James Bates led, which was vibrant, and
that's what I would say.
and there was another one.
That's what I'd say. Conservation has been fantastic, and it's led by
And
James
Tom
Bates.
Pettit, I recall doing an
Yes, and
incredible.
Tom Pettit, because yes, they're on the environmental team, so to speak. But when it's come to the regular planning, the regular planning, it's where it's gone awry. And yes, Councillor Williams is quite right. The way they speak, you get to the point where you think to yourself, have I missed a bit? Oh, shall I say something or am I going to look stupid? And they need to understand that. That's why I say you probably need councillor involvement as well.
Thank you. Councillor Malinder.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I laughed when you said about dumbing it down to councillors. Sadly, you are right. Part of my day job involves talking to local authorities all over England, and some of the work that I do most of the work I do is directly with officers, but I do also do presentations for councillors as well, and they are very different, and it's quite useful for me having done both myself as well. It's not exactly dumbing it down, it's just knowing your audience and who you're working with and who you're doing the presentation for. The officers are the experts. They know what they're doing. They're trained. They've maybe been to uni or done some courses or whatever, or depending on what the topic is. And they're the experts on that. And then we're the lay people. And you have to sort of approach it in a very different way. I think one of the things is there's a couple of things I'm thinking of. One is maybe make the death by PowerPoint stuff a bit less death by PowerPoint. There's a thing called Slido, which is really good for interactions. It just allows you to use a mobile phone or whatever, or a laptop, whatever. But you can just give feedback during presentations. You can do word clouds, you can do polls, you can do things, anything to make it a little bit more interesting, to sort of wake you up, make sure that you've not missed anything. That's one thing. The other thing, which I thought maybe was missing a little bit, we have had times as well when there has been a bit more participation by the chair of the committee in the training sessions, in that they're not giving the information, but they're doing little bits, introducing little bits part of the way through. And it's just, even something that's a change of voice every few slides really helps. If I've got a really long presentation that I've got to give and it might be a bit dull and you can't do anything massively interactive, I get one of my colleagues engaged on it as well. So that it's just not the same person that you're listening to continuously. So you're just swapping every sort of 10, 15 slides, something like that. That's something that can be done with people who have not got the best presentational skills. It's just letting someone else take the reins for a little bit. And when you're sitting there, you're watching it, it's kind of like, it just jerks you up a bit and sort of makes you pay a little bit more attention. So I think there are some things that can be done, even without sending the entire planning team off to learn how to do presentations and training.
Thank you. Councillor Varney.
Agree with every word of that, but Andrew Pegram's slide deck he showed me, if it could be dug out, I thought was also excellent. And so whilst I appreciate there are different presentations and different formats and Slido and everything else, totally agree. If we could dig that out, it was a very good introduction to basic planning. I wasn't bored, but maybe it was because I was flattered by the one-on-one attention. Who knows?
Thank you. I think that the theme coming back from everybody is that there are two levels to this. There's the very detailed planning knowledge that all the planners have. They're professionals, they really know their stuff. But trying to convey all that information is not what councillors need. Councillors just need to know how to do their bit. And I think one of the planning training sessions, there was a consensus that we just wanted a demo, a live demo of how you log in and you find the information. And unfortunately, they weren't able to do that because the connection wasn't working. But that is another way of making things very interactive. And I think what I'm hearing is everyone is saying the training that's given needs to look at what do the councillors need, not, oh, this is really cool, I know about this, that and the other, but what do the councillors need to do? And that's the starting point. Okay, thank you for that. I just want to move on then to the next question. Is the group aware of any additional training needs that the current programme fails to meet that could be investigated for inclusion? Anything missing that we would like to hear about? Councillor Lenter.
Well, it was briefly touched by Councillor Liz Plant during the motion on social care. I think we need a training course on corporate parenting and care leavers offers. So we are aware, first of all, of them as information. Where can we find them? What are they? What is the care leavers offers of Rushcliffe? What does it mean? What does it entail, corporate parenting? But as well to understand how that affects our services and how we can outreach to the young care experienced people to let them know about the offer and how to interact to get them involved. So that would be, I think, a valuable subject that we have almost unanimously passed this motion. I think that would be a good training course. And the second one, I think, is needed from my point of view, is on the charter, and maybe it is interrelated. I think it was touched again. I think there was a question in the previous council meeting, is to understand a charter of children's rights and children with equal rights to citizenship, not as future adults or investments of the future, but as citizens of the same neighborhood, the same rights as all, but with different perspective, with different desires, with different needs, with different outlooks, and to just look at that as well, because we need to understand children's rights, and we need to understand as well inclusive playgrounds, because there is all this information coming to us, and we just have cities and neighborhoods designed by adults and not incorporated the first person perspective of children as citizens, and that applies, suppose, in the first section. So these two suggestions.
Thank you. Is anyone else? Councillor Birch.
Yeah, so the only thing that really sort of jumped at me, and I don't know if it was touched upon in some of the sessions I've missed, but is the sort of format of the meetings, full council meetings themselves, with how it works in terms of motion, seconding, and the debate, points of order. I just had 8 million points of order on the first day. Very few of them landed. You know, there's not much information on that. I don't know if a mock meeting would even be beneficial to people, but that seemed to be missing to me. That, you know, there was no clear sort of instruction that I was aware of on how the actual meetings themselves worked, and all we've seen is a flow chart of how motions work and amendments and things, which is fantastic. But as I say, it might be better to have something a bit more interactive. That's my only comment.
Thank you. I don't know if you missed it or whether we did. We did do a mock-up, didn't we? I remember.
Yeah. There are several different things. So there was quite a lot on the Saturday. And Councillor Birch, I can't remember whether you came or were not able to. You did say earlier on that you worked on Saturdays. Yeah. So the Saturday that we did as part of the induction programme had quite a lot of information about how council worked and the different stages of the agenda and such like. We went into a lot of detail on points of order, motions, questions, etc. And Kath and Gemma have also done a separate motions training session, which was very well attended, and was, I think the feedback was something like, you know, it was good, it was interactive, people got up and chatted, and then there was something about hedgehogs and sweeties, and so you make up motions and you get to go through them and play with what's going on, and we try and make that as interactive as we possibly can. They are planning to rerun that again next year because it's something that we do on a regular basis.
Thank you very much. Councillor Varney.
the motions training. Oh my gosh, you got to do that. It's actually really good. It's one that really sticks in my memory. You proved your competence for a moment. I definitely can't work through that flowchart. I'm totally bewildered by it. It means valueless to me. But I got excited at the last full council meeting last week because when that came up, was how do we approve the right text in the third reiteration of whatever motion we were on. I was trying to find it. That spreadsheet was as much use as
No. Right, hang on. Are you talking about the old flowcharts or the new flowcharts?
Complicated.
No,
They need colour.
the new
Colour.
flowcharts have colour. They also have a written explanation in a table, and they were part of the council, the constitution amendments that you agreed in July, and I've just approved them on the version that now needs to go online.
So it will get better.
It'll get
Wonderful.
better. We work on it
Clarity.
all the time. It's going to get better.
Wonderful. Really good to hear. Councillor Cumberland.
It's easier now. You don't have to go to the leaders all the time. But even so, no, nightmare. In fact, I've forgotten what I'm going to say. What I was going to say.
Ideas
Oh,
for
I know.
additional
Yes.
training.
You were talking about needing some guidance around full council. Might be slightly controversial, but I'd also like to say and etiquette, because councillors don't understand, they don't know. First council session I ever went into, walked in, and Viv said to me, can't bring that in here. And I see it's happening now 14 years later because nobody says anything. And the other one was,
Said it on Thursday night.
I don't. It is the standing up when the mayor walks out. I notice people form off into their talking, and really should know that you stand up when the mayor leaves. It's a mark of respect. And I notice she now does say, if I stand up, everybody stops talking. Didn't last term. And yes, this is particular for those who might be hard of hearing. Can we not do this and then talk? Because you can't hear because the microphone's there. It's gone behind your screen. So it's important that everybody can hear, and the people at the back can hear. So there are things around etiquette within the meeting that I think are very important, and I think it is important that everybody can hear and can take part in full council.
Thank you. So, I mean, they are very key, important ergonomic points to ensure inclusivity and everyone can participate properly. Yeah, and that feeds through. There were terrible sound problems on Thursday, weren't there? Yeah. Okay, super. Okay, so I think we've just got one last question to deal with, really, which is, are there any concerns about training attendance? And if so, what action would the group like to take? And I know from the last meeting that I watched the recording of, sanctions were rejected, but you may want to discuss around those again. So any concerns about attendance? Councillor Birch.
So yeah, just to repeat again, I do struggle to attend because of work, and also I've also got a 2-year-old at home, so it's very difficult to attend evenings. I agree with you. I think there needs to be some sort of motivating force to make people go. My personal opinion, and I appreciate this is just me, I think there should be some sort of assessment. It doesn't have to be, mastermind, but it has to be, something that proves you do understand the information. I don't think there's anything unreasonable about that. We are paid to do this, and I think voters and residents could reasonably be expected, for us to know what we're talking about. And, even if the assessment is 50% or whatever it is, it could be discussed. But something like that, I think, would be useful. But in terms of attendance, as I say, it's difficult for me because I do diligently watch and read the PowerPoint presentations and things like that, and I do as much as I can. But there is, of course, no record that I'm doing that. It just looks like on a sheet of paper that I'm lazy and I'm not attending, which is not the case. So I don't know if there's anything that could be sort of designed into the system where it can actually show that councillors are engaging. And I'd say the assessment does do that. And I appreciate what you're saying about the most effective way of knowing if people have been trained in a given topic is on seats. It's there, it's very easy to measure that and see that. But as has already been said tonight, there is no way of knowing if somebody is thinking about their dinner or actually listening to the person. There's no way of sort of measuring that. So I think these things can be improved. And again, just to put all my cards on the table, my personal opinion is I think e-learning is the way we should go, and we should expand that. Again, demographically, I think I don't know what the demographics are, but I would assume the younger councillors are more inclined to go for the e-learning, which may actually be the minority of people on this council. So that's something to think about.
Thank you.
Yes, it's always a difficult one, isn't it? He says, having procedurally failed to engage with stuff on occasion. One of the things that I just sprung to mind about that when you were saying that we could put something on the councillors' profiles. The first one, alphabetically, is Matt Barney, unfortunately. So I'm looking at yours at the moment, just for the categories as much as anything. So it's contact info, declarations of interest, attendance record, Could put training sessions on there.
Name and shame.
It has been, sorry, just to answer that point, it has been discussed before, kind of like the e-learning. ModGov that does all of that stuff for you is a package we bring in. There is no category that would allow us to put training on there. We have asked. They're not developing it at the moment, so
It's
not possible.
Jail free card then. Councillor Barney.
God, I'm not usually one to disagree, but I'm going to really disagree strongly with both of you actually on this. I think that the last thing we want to do is put any barriers to any person, any ability, from any background, from any experience, from any group, socio group, any person, any school, anything, to be a councillor. We have professional officers who have to meet the grade and have to meet the performance criteria and have to fulfil the right criteria, and they protect councillors, hopefully, as far as they can, from making too gross, inadvertent errors and mistakes. We also have each other. And I just think that if we start saying that I've qualified in this area or that area, or that, it's going to be a huge barrier. And it might mean that some of the people that actually have the most to offer in terms of life experience, in terms of what they can bring in shaping the experience in their communities, wouldn't come to the chamber. I also think that we need to be careful in terms of putting people's records up, because I myself, I'm a county councillor. Maybe that makes me a bad councillor because I'm a dual hatter. I don't think it does. I think it makes me more informed. I'm the cabinet lead on the county council for adult social care. I think that probably makes me a better borough councillor, but that also means I'm quite busy a lot of the time doing that. I'm a father of 4. That means I'm involved in all sorts of local social clubs and different organisation groups. I think that makes me a better councillor. I work in the hydrogen industry. I sit on a government group. All of these things mean that I'm a busy person. All my fault probably make me a bad borough councillor. I would strongly argue the counter opposite. If I never sat on one training course here again, I would be a better councillor because of my life experience, not from doing e-learning, from doing any of your lovely, wonderful, incredibly brilliant training courses. I appreciate some have to be done because we have to meet the statutory criteria, but I could not more firmly disagree. The councillor's role is a human one, shaped by your human experience. The more of that you have, the less time you have in life, the more you're a better councillor for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barney.
Sorry,
Really pertinent points. So I think you have some very pertinent points there. Absolutely, we are all humans and we want this role to be accessible to everybody. Councillor Comeback.
I'd have to agree with Councillor Barney. And also, I would have to say, in the light of diversity, and a question that came up to scrutiny about how we could encourage more people to take an interest in council and to apply to be councillors, this would put people off. I don't think we'd be all inclusive. So I would have to say I disagree. Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Birch.
Yeah, so absolutely perfectly legitimate points of view there, and we can have a civil discussion about that, I'm sure. I'm not saying publish these results. I'm not saying advertise that it's going to be sort of gradings or anything like that. all we're trying to demonstrate is competence and understanding, which is what we're asking councillors already. And I take your point, because you don't want to create an environment where people are intimidated. And of course, as you say, we want to get people from all sorts of backgrounds and even academic backgrounds. And some of the most competent people I've ever met in my life are not academic. They have other skills they bring to the table. So I absolutely hear that. All I'm saying is, as a way of measuring, people have understood what is being taught. There are certain things we need to know. We need to know what we can reject, planning applications for. We need to know certain things, in detail and understand them. And that's all I'm saying is to bring that to the table. But I'd say perfectly legitimate points of view.
Thank you, Councillor Barney.
Thank you for. I'm not happy to debate. I still don't agree. I think ultimately that the assessment of whether I've been a good councillor or not is decided at the ballot box, and I can be voted out of office if I'm incompetent. And I don't think my fellow councillors, they can shape. And if I'm wise, I'll listen to what they have to say. And I think I do get kicked quite a lot by, as I say, from people from all groups. I did make reference earlier, my friends in East League who are independent councillors. I think they've got my best interest at heart. And I think that in democracy, particularly at this level, we're not national government here. As far as possible, we shouldn't be knocking political chunks out of each other. We should be supporting each other. Actually, we're all on the same team. We want the best, don't we, collectively for Rushcliffe? And I'd like to see politics go more in that direction. And I think if any form of referencing our abilities and referencing them against each other, I think would be a very unhealthy thing in this setting. And I'd be dead set against it. And I'm going to stop going on about it.
Thank you, Councillor Malinder.
Yeah, fair points. And I wasn't suggesting that we have like a gold, silver, and bronze star thing on there as well. I don't think the technology would permit it, even if we all wanted it. But no, it's. But yeah, I think it's fair points, and I totally get where you're coming from. And yeah, you're quite right. People have all kinds of background experience. But one of the things that we did talk about previously was, could we all go back to our groups and say to people, hey, this is really useful planning training or whatever other training. Please do make use of it. It's a little bit different now because we have a wider range of groups represented now. But on the other hand, that means that there's it's easy to just talk to fellows of Green Member or fellows of Rushcliffe Independent or whatever or Labour, and it's an easy thing to have in a discussion, to have in a small group, and just say, okay, we can't all be experts in everything, but there's some very, very useful training here. Why don't you do that one? I'll do this one. However you want to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Manda. I mean, just a reminder of why we're all here. We're talking about the training that's available and ensuring it's accessible. The whole point of it is to support individual councillors so they are capable and comfortable of doing their roles. And I notice in the documentation that there are a few who are on the lower end of attendance, and I think we do have something already in place, which is your record, and I think that role actually falls to you then to go to those individuals and support them, because there may be reasons. Someone might be dyslexic, they may be having a hard time, and I think that is very much your role to find out what the impediments are and support them in that. But I would like to say positively going forward, I think the training has been very well engaged. I think the induction programme that's been put together and the follow-on training is a good mix. We've come up with some ideas of how to move those forward, but I would like to finish the meeting on one suggestion, if I may, and that is about the follow-ups with our individual training records. You said that you were going to send them out to individuals. Perhaps that could be a more regular thing, and that is a way of encouraging people. So 3 or 4 times a year, perhaps once a quarter, just sending out. Does anyone want to come in on that point or suggestion to follow up? Final comments to the meeting? Councillor Williams.
I think kind of once a like year cycle kind of thing, because again you're going to be on different committees. Committees change each May, so maybe potentially when it comes to May or soon after, to see when, well, like kind of what your gaps are, what you've done on on e-learning, what you haven't, and kind of some of the mandatory kind of ones as well, because again your circumstances might change that you then might not have done licensing, and then you put on the licensing committee, And likewise, you could be then put on the planning, and you've got to do the planning committee training, not the ward councillor planning. So those kind of things. But I do think going what is kind of is to explore potentially on Teams. I know we've said that, and some people like it face to face, but I think previously when we've had it in the previous term, they were quite well attended for some of the ones that weren't mandatory subjects, but kind of an information training session as well. So it might help boost those numbers with people attending if they were in the as a teams session as well, just because we are kind of a spread out borough, and as I say, people have got their own circumstances, and sometimes when they've been on a Tuesday night, it's often when parishes are on as well. So people are kind of having to nip off to do that and might not then be able to come. And it's a shame that it's only on the one night and that's it. And then it's kind of never again for them to try and to then do it. So if there's something with some of these training sessions that we've had this year for the first year, then look at doing again if there's a demand for it, because like I say, it's don't want to give up offers of time to do if there's just two people that ultimately turn up.
Yeah, thank you. I think we were opposite ends there, once a year, me going four times a year. But I mean, it's about finding out where people are at to then work out what support they need, and that does kind of encourage them to engage. Councillor Cumberland.
Yes, if I can agree with what Councillor Williams said. Or in the licensing training, for example, I couldn't attend because I think I got another meeting somewhere. And I would like to have done that, but it was only on one session. And there's going to be some till training. I won't be able to go to that. And I think, yeah, that's complicated and you need to keep updating with that. So I think, yeah, we do need to look at the alternative dates as well.
Okay, thank you.
On that licensing training, it was about being on the licensing committee and being on, if you had a license hearing. I think recall that we had some training on licenses of what's a kind of for premises, a holder and a taxi license around the actual legislation as well. There was previously done on that, which I think kind of councillors might find useful, because the training that we had on that was more about being on the committee and what you can and do around a license, what conditions you can put, and how and what happens at a hearing, and there was case studies, and it was up more to date with kind of recent cases as well, which was useful to hear, because again, like I said, the world changes and licensing world changes. So I think it would be useful for councillors to have that kind of knowledge on the licensing acts and what falls into that, because I think we did have that previously, and that was interesting for ward councillors who not necessarily be on the committee as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've. Councillor Phillips.
Just one final comment then. In the old days, we used to sign in when we came for training. Now we don't sign in. Are we all being captured? We are. Thank you.
Your eagle eyes. Wonderful. So I think we've covered all the questions that we've been asked to cover. We've had a few suggestions about training that may be needed going forwards, and provision of those training records for people and support individually to be followed up. Okay, so thank you all very much for coming. And we need to arrange a date for the next meeting.
Tracy will be in touch about that.
Yeah. So what is that, in 6 months roughly, or?
Well, this meeting is a bit more ad hoc. It's more about when it's required.
Okay. Well, can I suggest then that based on the level of uptake, that should be a trigger for when we may or may not need another meeting going forwards. Okay, lovely. Thank you all very much. Thank you.